I usually don't like certain approaches that people take to make a stab at Thomas and Friends, because not only does the franchise not deserve such harsh criticism, but it also shows the lack of understanding the people in question have of the actual show, proving their statements wrong and unjustified. However, if they show remorse for their aggressive behavior, I may be willing to forgive them for the common misdirection that they take in contemplating the show, because I can understand where they can make their mistakes. But I don't think such consideration should be given to the NRA TV's recent attack on the show, because their statement proves that not only do they not understand the show, but they also have a complete lack of human empathy, intellect, and evidence to support their argument. Having watched this show and read the books for practically all my life, I can prove it to everyone. So here we go. The host of this video in question is a certain Dana Loesch. Well, she looks nice. Let's see what she has to say about the recent changes made to Thomas and Friends.
Thomas the Tank is now bringing gender balance to the show by adding girl trains. Seriously.
Listen, Loesch, I've seen many other women attack Thomas on the lack of female characters, and while the original stories had no intention to discriminate anyone, you do have to acknowledge that girls need more role models so that they don't have to be put down and over-dominated by the male populace. You should at least appreciate the direction the show's going towards, given the fact that you yourself are a woman. By the way, are you talking about big containment capsules or big camo guns on Caterpillar tracks? Because I don't see any tanks on the screen. Just tank engines and tender engines.
One of those trains, Nia, will be from Kenya to add ethnic diversity to the show. And by the way, that's where it gets really strange to me, because I've looked at Thomas and Friends at their pictures and I see gray and blue. Am I to understand this entire time that Thomas and his trains were white?
No, because you're actually talking about race, not ethnicity. There's a difference between the two. Race is a property concerning the physical attributes of any human being that determines their continent of origin. This includes the color of their skin, the shape of their heads, eyes, noses, mouths, and such. Ethnicity, on the other hand, refers to the cultural aspects of any person's country of origin. Traditions, beliefs, artistic styles, products, lifestyles, languages, all that stuff. For instance, Nia's ethnic qualities are that she is from Kenya, she can speak Swahili, and she has an African pattern on the side of her water tanks.
How do you bring ethnic diversity? I mean, they had to paint what I guess they thought was some sort of African pattern on the side of Nia's engine?
No, her water tanks! Nia herself is already an engine. What's on her sides are her tanks. If you don't know your technical facts on railway engines, then maybe you should spare yourself the embarrassment and not talk about them at all. Same goes to ethnic qualities. If you don't know about them, don't talk about them. The production team of Thomas and Friends goes through all this trouble of doing research and learning about these various types of engines and traditions and patterns and such. Believe me, Thomas and Friends is all about authenticity. Where do you think they get the designs of the engines from? I'll give you a hint. It's not from their heads.
I mean, I'm looking at this picture and I'm really struggling to understand how in the world there isn't any diversity in any of this. Oh, was it because, I see it, it was the white clothes and the burning train tracks. Fine, I get it. Thomas the Tank Engine has been alive in race relations for far too long. Clearly, this is overdue, right?
Wow! You really had to scrape the bottom of the barrel for that one. And I know that you went straight to the bottom of the barrel because there is nothing else in the barrel for you to pick out. You have absolutely no substance to present a legitimate and logical argument for your thesis. As I said in the beginning of the video, I said that I'd forgive the odd complainer for their misconception of Thomas the Tank Engine because I can understand why they're making their statement in the first place. Thomas is sexist. There aren't enough female engines being brought to the forefront, but again, the stories weren't intended to discriminate gender, so you can't really blame them. Steam engines are racist to diesels. Again, there is no such conception as race to the railway engines, so phrasing it like that is unjustified. True, the steamers did show contempt towards diesels who were subsequently shunned, but that was during the Bronze Age of Thomas and Friends, when the show was produced by people who didn't know or understand the rivalry between the steamers and diesels and the reasons why. The engines are slaves under the fat controller who runs a communist/fascist system. Well, I think this argument is a bit of an exaggeration because primarily railway engines are built for the purpose to transport people and cargo around the island, and they're quite happy to do so most of the time. If they were slaving away, they'd be unhappy and maltreated. Probably their crews would abuse them to the extent of deliberately trying to blow up the engines. Think about that, folks. But your argument, Loesch, is just pure excrement. You are so desperate to find ways to make Thomas look bad for doing something right that you had to pull this rot right out of your behind just so that you can pick a fight with him. And it doesn't surprise me that you want to pick up a fight because your show, the NRA TV, is managed by the National Rifle Association. Guns! Guns are tools of fighting. You are desperate to try to maintain and influence a state of warfare so that you can make millions of dollars out of manufacturing guns, which incidentally have been used in terrorist attacks, school shootings, mass shootings, public shootings, homicide, killing hundreds and hundreds of innocent civilians who want to live their own lives and have done nothing to deserve their lives being wasted. Your argument against Thomas is just a pure form of discrimination, and it, like other discriminatory offenses, is a pathetic one. I'm also not surprised that your argument is both pathetic and apathetic at the same time, because guess who the NRA is in association with, people? That's right, the big fat calloused egotistical money-hoarding imbecile himself. Hey Trump, you want fake news? I bet the NRA has got plenty stored in their databases. In all sincerity, though, this is a rather disgraceful move on your behalf, Loesch. You attempt to associate Thomas with the KKK out of pure spite of embracing more of our human society, and by far, it is the worst attack I have ever seen from someone who doesn't watch or understand the show. The Ku Klux Klan is a group of self-centered, regressive white humans who make absolutely no attempt to improve our society and are willing to put all of their hatred and evil onto anyone who does not meet their categories and other white people who stand up for diversity. Thomas and Friends is none of that. Thomas the Tank Engine is the creation of an English reverend who wanted to entertain his sick 2-year-old child. And it has grown into a highly successful series that entertains both children and adults to this day. Thomas and Friends does not encourage hatred to others. The stories support friendship, cooperation, and morality, explores ways of life, choices, consequences, and they make children happy, which was what the Reverend Wilbert Awdry wanted his stories to do. Your statement, Loesch, is a pathetic attempt to exploit an element that does not exist in the stories at all just for the sake of dismissing human diversity because movements for that are what threaten your company. Personally, I think that the National Rifle Association having a TV show of its own is pathetic as well. It just goes to show how desperate they are to maintain a public image and keep their business running. It's not even a good business. They don't care about what happens to people should they get involved in a shooting. All they're concerned about are their own personal interests, guns and money. After saying that, the NRA sounds more like the KKK than Thomas and Friends does. You know, folks, if the NRA by any chance sees Thomas and Friends as a threat to their establishment, I can understand that. Because just last year, the production team of Thomas & Friends joined forces with the United Nations to support and showcase the world's sustainability goals, which does not include warfare and gunfight, because those don't support or sustain our world. War and gunfight is just a huge irrational disagreement between two parties who don't agree on the same subject and are too dense to come up with a reasonable compromise. It just goes on and on and on for many years, and probably wouldn't ever end unless someone with common sense steps in and does the right thing. Take Robert E. Lee, for example. Yeah, I know he was a Confederate general, but at least he had morality. He knew the recession of the Confederate from the United States was a stupid idea, as was the concept of slavery and the idea of war between North and South. The only reason why he joined the South in the end was because his home state, Virginia, joined the South and, well, a general has an honorable sense of duty to protect their home. And rather than continue fighting in 1865, he went up to General Grant, despite his wishes not to, and came to a compromise ending the Confederacy and the war. And it was a rather peaceful compromise as well. Look it up if you don't believe me. The point I'm making here is that the NRA is doing the wrong thing by criticizing Thomas & Friends for doing something right, dismissing gun restriction laws, and looking into ways of developing 3D printed guns. Yeah, you heard that right. They're actually going there. What's wrong about what the NRA is doing is that they're opening up the more potential risks of public shootings by mentally unstable, homicidal lunatics onto hundreds of innocent civilians. Thomas & Friends are doing something right. In unity with the United Nations, they are helping to make a world a better place for humanity. So now, Loesch, you're gonna have to put up with both the Thomas production team and the UN for your statement. And if you have any problem with the direction Thomas & Friends are going in, keep it to yourself, because you have nothing to support your claims about the show representing hate groups who don't know how to grow up, and it'll make you look like an idiot if you attempt to make such a claim. But then you already did, so I'll leave you to question your own intelligence.